Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, an assembled company wherever you are in this world, welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe. And tonight we have with us, for the third in this series of Nart Stories, and we'll tell you all about these. But could you put your hands together and welcome to the cafe for the third time and the third in this fantastic stories I've never come across before, Dawn Ellis.
Oh, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. And it's been such a delight to have a safe, lovely residence and home to come to every Wednesday to tell these stories, which I love so much. And I've been discovering new ones as well along the way. So this is very much a sort of the first outing of some of these stories. And hopefully, as I said last week, I'll be taking them on the road next year, if there is a road to take them on. Fingers crossed for that. Maybe I'll come to Romania and visit you. And so just to give you a little bit of a background, those people who haven't been with us for the last few Wednesdays, I'm telling stories about the Narts. And nobody's ever heard of the Narts. The Narts are a wild group of horsemen and warriors and cattle rustlers who roamed across the grasslands and the hills and the mountains of the Caucasus way back in the Golden Age. And these Narts were superb horsemen, both men and women. And they were not averse to nipping over to a neighbour's homestead, rustling some cattle and going back with it. And that was pretty much the way they conducted their courtship as well. They would often rush off to the neighbouring farm or homestead, pick up a woman, throw her over the saddle and take her home. Now, this seems a little bit extreme to us nowadays, maybe, but back in the day, that was the way it was done and that was the way it was accepted. And the Narts, they didn't care so much for possessions. They had a motto and it was about honour. And their motto was, if our lives be short, may our fame be great. We will not live in grief. We will live in freedom, as they galloped off over the plains. Hopefully you get the idea. And the wealthier and more famous Narts lived in tall stone towers. And if you were to go even now across the Black Sea and make landfall on the other side of the Black Sea, there you would be in modern day Georgia. And in that land and up towards the mountainous areas, you can still see the stone towers that the Narts used to live in. So they are real. And in fact, every word I'm going to tell you is absolutely true. And today I am going to tell you, I have the great pleasure of telling you stories about the trickster of the Narts. And the trickster of the Narts was called Sherdon. But we have to reel back a little bit and start with his birth. And it starts with the queenly Zarasha. Now, Zarasha, those of you who were here last week, you may remember Zarasha of the golden hair. And she was called queenly because her pure golden hair was often worn wreathed around her head like a crown. And because she was the widow of the very famous warlord Warkag, now dead. And Zarasha lived in a tall wooden tower at the very head of the Nart village, and she was much respected. So what you need to know about Zarasha is she wasn't a real Nart. She had been born under the sea, and her father was the god of the sea, Don Betir, and so her childhood was spent within the mother-of-pearl walls of Don Betir's palace. So you may well imagine that Zarasha, surrounded by the earthy, fiery Narts and all the galloping about and the weapons, took every opportunity she could to go to the water. Every morning, she insisted that it was she who went down to the bubbling spring, which came up into a pool of crystal clear water, and fetched the water herself. So she would go down there and drift her fingers in the clear waters, secluded with ferns all around her, and maybe dream of her homeland under the sea. One day, when she was collecting water, she was very surprised by what looked like a boulder over on the other side of the pool rear up, and its head, covered in reeds and rushes, turned into the head of the river god, Gutag. Now, she knew Gutag of old. He'd always had his eye on her when she was growing up, a young girl in the mother-of-pearl palace of her father. And Gutag laid his hand on her and he said, "My dear Zarasha, you know it makes sense. We belong together, creatures of the water. Come to me, Zarasha." Zarasha shook herself free and she left that spring and she went home. She stayed away from the spring for as long as she could. But in the end, the yearning got too great for her and she took her pictures and she went back down to the spring and she looked around. No suspicious looking boulder with reeds and rushes growing out of it. Everything was still. And so Zarasha relaxed. She relaxed so much that she was able to take off her clothes and dip herself into that water and begin to submerge herself into the silky water. And then she felt her ankles gripped and dragged down, and she felt herself wrapped in the clammy embrace like seaweed, and she felt fingers probing into her body and cold clammy lips clamped against hers, and the voice of Gutag whispering in her ear, "Now I have you, my darling, come with me." And he dragged her down to the depths of that spring. Some time later, bubbles appeared on the surface of the water, and then a sleek golden head broke the surface of the water, and Zarasha stepped up out of the water and shook herself off and went home. But something had changed, and a few weeks later her belly swelled. She was pregnant. Zarasha, she managed to keep the pregnancy secret. And when her time came, she made her way down to the seashore, to the beach, where she knew she was at home. And there, on the shingle, she gave birth to a baby boy. And she named that boy Sherdon, which means wild one. And then she took the baby and she put it oh so gently onto the waters, and she gave the baby a little push. "Oh, there you go, my darling." And she launched the baby out onto the waves. And then she called, "Father, I'm giving you my child. Look after him until he's grown up." And then a hand came above the surface of the water and pulled down that baby, and the baby disappeared. So Sherdon grew up like his mother inside the mother-of-pearl walls of his grandfather's palace underneath the ocean. He was very much left to his own devices, and so often as not you would find him wandering out on the ocean floor, looking up at the lofty forests of kelp waving in unseen currents as they ebbed and flowed backwards and forwards, and the light filtered down through those kelp forests to the floor beneath. And there he would see in the blue and purple deep a conger eel with a body thicker than his leg, a conger eel vanishing into a deep hole in the sand, and then its sharp teeth ambushing prey. And Sherdon would watch, scuttling along the ocean floor, crabs, scuttling sideways, but with their eyes facing to the front. And he saw how in this way they ambushed the small worms and shrimps that they ate. His golden-haired aunts, his mother's sisters, his golden-haired aunts, taught him things. They taught him simple tricks and the art of divination. And one of the tricks they taught him, and they said, pay attention, Sherdon, this is going to be useful to you, my dear, was the art of vanishing under the earth when he needed to, whenever he was chased. And he developed this skill, and you will see how he used it later. So his childhood passed. And then the day came when Sherdon was all grown up and he heard his mother's call. And the day came for him to part and to leave his grandfather. And his grandfather called him to him, and he put a mark on Sherdon's forehead. And his grandfather said, that mark, Sherdon, my boy, that is your luck. Oh, am I going to have good luck? Said Sherdon. It's complicated, said Don Betier, and he said, you'll find out as you go through, and quickly swam away. And Sherdon, he made his way away from the ocean, and he made his way far through the depths to the mouth of a great river. And then he made his way up that river against the current into water that was brown and green, rushing towards him. And he's made his way up until he found a great stone span of a bridge. And there was his mother waiting for him, golden-haired Zarasha. And she pulled him up out of the water. Darling, she said. Welcome, she said. I've got a surprise for you. And she said, I've made you a house. It's just under here. And she showed him, just where the water met the bank, there was a hole. And she took him along, and they swam along a tunnel. And when they came out of the tunnel, there was a vaulted hall. Sherdon couldn't even see the end of it, with pillars rising up in blue and green and shining like dark glass. And his mother said, it's bigger than you think. She said, this is your secret palace, she said. And you can bring anything you want to down here. And the time will come, she said, when there are things that you will want to bring here. And you will want to keep it secret. Don't tell anyone, my boy. But for now, she said, go and claim your birthright. Go into the Nart marketplace, make your way there, introduce yourself, and be sure to say, you are of the house of Warcag. So Sherdon got out of the river and he made his way over the bridge into the Nart village. He threaded his way through the bustling marketplace, and there, oh there over the other side, under a shady tree, were the famous Narts that he'd heard about. There was the one with the black beard, that must be Wazameg. Oh, and then over there, his twin brother, silky moustached Karmis. Ah, and there was no mistaking that one. That was fiery Sosruko, the young hero who slayed giants. And Sherdon braced himself, and he walked up confidently to those Narts, and he said, excuse me. He said, I am Sherdon. He said, I am your cousin. I come from the house of Warcag. I greet you, my cousins. And he made a low bow. And he waited. He waited for the bear hug that would surely enfold him from the large, father-like Narts, but nothing. When he looked up, he found the Narts looking him up and down. You don't look much like a Nart, lad, said black-bearded Wazameg. I've never heard of a boy coming out of the house of Warcag recently. No, said Karmis, and how much cattle have you got? Well, I don't have any cattle, said. I haven't got anything yet, said Sherdon. What about your horse? Said Sosruko. You can't be a Nart without a horse. Where's your horse? I haven't got a horse, said Sherdon. Well, you can ride then, can't you? Said Sosruko. I haven't tried riding yet, said John. What about your hunting? Said Karmis. You can hunt, can't you? I can catch fish, if that's any use to you, said Sherdon. You're not a Nart, they said. Come back when you can prove you're a Nart, my boy. Don't bother us now. So Sherdon made his way out of the market square, back to his secret palace under the bridge. And then there followed a difficult time for Sherdon over the next weeks and months. Try as he might, he didn't seem to be able to please the Narts. He did whatever he could to be accepted. He used his talents. For example, he could tell a young woman whether she was going to have a girl or a boy when she was pregnant, and that was useful. But then, said the Narts to each other, he's got a very pale face. He's got a kind of greenish pallor to his face. That's not like us, is it? And they looked at each other's ruddy, weather-beaten faces. And have you noticed, said Carmis, how his features seem to slide about the place? You never know whether the lad is looking at you or not. You think he's looking at you, and then you find he's looking somewhere else. I don't trust him. Well, one day they were about to set off, Wazameg, Carmis, and Sosruko, on a hunt. And Sherdon persuaded them to take him with them, and off he went on foot with them. And he knew where the game was, and he said, you need to go over there. That's where it is. And when the Narts followed his advice, they got more game than they'd got in the last months. Oh, he is useful, they said to each other. But why did he do it? The next day, smarting from some insult that fiery Sosruko had made, Sherdon stole away Sosruko's favourite bitch, his hunting dog. He doctored a little bit of meat. He put a little bit of magic in it. He enticed the big dog away, a bit like Max, Tina, this dog. He enticed the dog away, and he took it back, and he fed it, and soon the dog would answer to no one but Sherdon, and he kept the dog there. Sosruko, he suspected Sherdon, especially when Sherdon would say, have you found your dog yet? Perhaps your dog has gone to someone she prefers, to Sosruko, and he knew that somehow Sherdon must have it, but whenever he tried to follow Sherdon, Sherdon vanished under the ground. Sosruko was left looking for him. Well, this was how it went. But meanwhile, Sherdon had built himself a modest house on the outskirts of the village, nothing too fancy, and this was his official residence. And he lived there, scraping a living, truth to tell, because this luck mark that he had on his forehead, it didn't bring him much luck. It all seemed to be about bringing other people luck so far. He couldn't even afford a horse, which was just as well because he couldn't ride to save his life. And he got the reputation for being shifty. He's sly, that one, said the Narts. You can't trust him. And he didn't pay his debts, and that wasn't Nart-like. One time, Sherdon bought on tick a lovely woolen blanket from the cloth merchant, but he didn't pay it back. I want the money back, said the cloth merchant. I'll pay you, said Sherdon. It's just a question of waiting. He who waits will be rewarded. But he never paid. And finally, the cloth merchant could stand it no longer, and he went into the marketplace to look for Sherdon. Where's Sherdon? He's out there digging a ditch, they said. So the cloth merchant went over the bridge to where Sherdon was hacking away at the ground, and he'd made some headway into digging a ditch. Where's my money? Said the cloth merchant. Come on, out with it. You either give me your money or you give me the cloth back. Well, said Sherdon, wait a minute. Can't you see what I'm doing here? You're digging a ditch. Yes, said Sherdon. I'm digging a ditch. And then I'm digging a ditch. And when the ditch is dug, it'll be full of water before you know it. So there you are. No, I don't get it, said the cloth merchant. Where's my money? Wait. You don't. So you see, when it's full of water, I'm going to plant thorn trees all along it. Thorn trees. And then come the spring, and the goats and the sheep are going to be driven out, aren't they? They're always driven out past here. They're going to stop for a drink of water. They stop for a drink of water, and their lovely fleece gets caught on the thorn bushes. And then, now do you see? So I take it, and I clean it, and I card it, and I spin it, and then I weave it into a magnificent cloth, he said. You're looking at your cloth. I am now engaged in repaying your debt. The cloth merchant opened and shut his mouth a few times, and then he just shrugged and he walked back across that bridge back into the Nart village, and he crossed off Sherdon's name from his list of debtors. He's a bad debt. And so Sherdon's reputation of being shifty and not to be trusted was even worse. But they did take him on their hunts with him often, because he did find the game. And one day, Sherdon, he went into the marketplace looking for Wazameg, Karmis and Sosruko. Oh, they've gone off hunting, said someone. They're over there. They've gone off there. Gone off without him. So Sherdon followed them anyway, on foot, since he didn't have a horse. And Sherdon, he trekked all day across the tawny-coloured grasses of those hills in the late autumn. And come mid-afternoon, he was getting hungry, and he stopped for lunch. And he looked around for a safe place to settle down and eat. Very exposed out here on the plains. Anyone could see him. And there in front of him, so close that he could smell the pine, smell that scent that a pine forest has, was a dense green forest. That was the place to go, he said. And he set off just into the safety of the shadows, and he was nearly inside the forest when, bang and splinter, there was a great wrenching of trees, and up he looked, and a massive hand the size of an ox, parted the trees, and behind the head, a head of a giant looking down at him. Sherdon froze, but after that, everything happened very, very fast. And before he had time to move, a cudgel the size of a tree trunk, bang, came down on the head of the giant, and the giant started to fall. And there was another face behind the first one, bigger. It was a second giant, and that second giant was wielding the cudgel, but just as it was about to give a second blow, a fist into the ear of the second giant, and the second giant began to fall to the ground, and behind the fist was an even more massive head of the third giant. And the third giant was just coming over, and he tripped over the first two giants, and all three giants fell to the ground together, bang, bang, bang. And for an instant, Sherdon was treated to the sight of 6 eyes at head level staring at him before they closed. Silence. All at once, it came to Sherdon that he'd narrowly escaped death, and he turned on his heel and he began to creep away, retracing his steps, and he'd gone a little way when he heard something. I wants the precious things. No, it's not fair. You never shared. Give me the precious things. No, they're mine. Well, at the words precious things, Sherdon's ears had pricked up, and he turned around. And there were the giants sitting back on their haunches, still looking dazed and arguing with each other. Sherdon, he put on his most captivating smile, and he went towards those giants, and he gave a low bow, and he said, your luck is in, my masters. May I introduce myself? I am Sherdon the Wise. I am Sherdon the Magnificent. I am Sherdon the Lawgiver of the Narts. You'll likely have heard of me. No, said the giants. Can we eat him? Said the second one. Wait, said Sherdon. If you haven't heard of me, you'll likely have heard of Wazameg, the great warrior Nart. Wazameg, you've heard of him. He always comes to me for advice. Well, they had heard of Wazameg, who'd had a relationship with the giants for some time. They nodded dumbly. Well, said Sherdon, I am that man. I happened to be passing, and I heard you talking and understand that you're having a dispute, and that's my job. Now, You're in luck, he said, for today, for one day only. I'm not going to charge 500 pieces of gold. I'm not going to charge 50 pieces of gold. Free, gratis, an offer which will last for one day only. I will help you settle your dispute. What seems to be the problem? The treasures, said the second one. And the first one produced the treasures. And they were, item, 1 black ram skin, 1 perfectly ordinary looking 3-legged table, 3 a piece of rope looped up into so you could hold it. Very nice, said Sherdon. They're lovely, and they are precious because they're special, said the first giant. They're special because... And then he clammed up, he clamped his mouth shut, and he refused to say any more. Special because, said Sherdon. The second giant piped up. They're really special because the skin, it can fly, and you can get on the skin and make it go wherever you want in the whole world. And the table, oh, that's the most special because you can ask it and it will give you lovely food, and you can have food and drink as much as you can eat. Very special, said Sherdon, very special indeed. And the rope? And the third one piped up excitedly. The rope is especially exciting because when you wrap it round something, it makes it lose weight, and when it makes it very tiny and you can carry it. Oh, said Sherdon. Oh, I see. So if a man, for example, hypothetically speaking, didn't have a horse and needed to carry quite a lot of possessions that were quite heavy from one place to another, he could wrap the rope around and it would make it tiny and easily portable. Yes, said the giant. Well, said Sherdon, I see how special. And I wants them. No, I wants them. And they started the argument again. Wait, said Sherdon. Is that what you really want, my masters? Surely what you really, really want is your friendship back again. Surely you want to be blood brothers again. Isn't that what you really want in your heart of hearts, to stop all this fighting? Tears welled up in the second giant's eyes. He nodded dumbly, and so did the others. Well, you're in luck, said Sherdon, because I can help you settle the dispute. Right, this is what we're going to do. Now, pay attention. You see this bow and arrow? In a minute, not yet, I'm going to shoot 3 arrows. 3 arrows, he said. And the first one, that's yours. That's going to go over there across the plain. And then I'm going to shoot a second arrow. That will be yours. And we're going to shoot it over the forest. And then the third one, that's yours, will go over towards the mountains. You're going to run after your arrow when I shoot it, and the first one to bring me back his arrow, he gets first pick of the treasures. But, he said, my masters, there's enough for everyone. You each get a treasure. That's the fair way. Trust me. And after he'd explained his plan again 2 or 3 times, the giants finally got it. Right, said Sherdon. Are you ready? And he got the bow and arrow ready. Steady, said Sherdon. Wait for it, he said. Go! And he shot 3 arrows in quick succession to the plains, to the forest, and to the mountain. And the giants went. They thundered away towards their respective arrows. And as soon as they were out of sight, Sherdon, he took that rope, he wrapped it round his arm, and then he put the 3-legged table on the ram skin, and he stood on the ram skin. Take me home. I command you to take me home, said Sherdon. And then the sides of the ram skin flipped up, and the ram skin raised itself to head level and shot back across the plain with Sherdon on it. And very quickly it deposited him down safely onto his own flat roof. And it wasn't even nightfall yet. Well, Sherdon, he wasted no time in inviting all those famous Narts, Wasameg, Kermis and Sosruko to a feast. And it was the work of a moment to command the table to provide everything that anyone could want to eat and drink. And the Narts came, and the feast was in full swing, and Sherdon was planning how he could finally redress the balance and finally be fully accepted into the Narts. And they were feasting away, and Sherdon was thinking, I'll give away the treasures to the Narts. I'll give away all 3 treasures to the Narts. Well, maybe 2 will be enough, because I should keep one from. I'll give away a treasure. I'll give away one of the treasures to the Narts, and then they'll accept me. At this point, the Narts had finished eating, and they were wiping the grease from their moustaches, and they were starting to tell hunting stories. And Wasameg was starting. He was telling a story about a black vixen, and how he'd caught it, and just then Sherdon was thinking, which one shall I give away? I'll give the skin. No, I can't give the skin, because the skin, if somebody wanted to get out of a tight spot quickly, that would be the perfect thing to keep. I should keep the skin just in case. I'll give away the rope. The rope's the thing. No, that's the most practical of all, he thought to himself. If a person doesn't have a horse, for example, and wanted to take a large number of possessions from one place to another, as he very well might, then that rope is going to come in very, very handy. The table, I'll give the table. And at this point, Wasameg was saying, I was a dog for 6 months. And he thought, Wasameg, I'll give it to Wasameg. He's the leader. I'll give the table to Wasameg. And just then Wasameg said, and we looked around and we looked for the vixen, and the skin had gone. And everyone guffawed and stamped and clapped Wasameg on the back. And then it was Sosruko's turn to tell a story. And Sosruko, the giant slayer, said, well, I was hunting the other day. When I was hunting, you'll never guess what I saw. I came across a magnificent sow, a wild sow such as you'd never seen before. And this sow was giving suck to 12 piglets. And she only had one giant teat. And the first piglet was latching onto the giant teat. And the second piglet was latching onto the tail of the first piglet. And the third piglet was latching onto the tail of the second piglet. And so it went like a piglet necklace, said Sosruko. Nothing so much as a piglet necklace. And out of the tail of the 12th piglet spurted milk. He said, I laughed so much I couldn't even see straight to shoot them. And everybody laughed, and everybody slapped Sosruko on the back. And then all eyes turned to Sherdon. Your turn, Sherdon, they said. You as the host. Can you better those stories? Oh, matter of fact, I can, said Sherdon. I have got a story for you. Yes. It's a hunting story. Hunting, said Sosruko. I don't think so. Hunting from the safety of your own bed, more like. It is a hunting story, said Sherdon. The other day I was out hunting, and I trekked for miles, and I came across you came across something invisible, was it? Said Sosruko. Invisible, like the cloth we've all heard about. Liar. I am not a liar, said Sherdon. I came across 3 giants, and they were fighting, and these giants were fighting over magical treasures, and I'll tell you about the magical treasures in a minute, but you need to know that I got the better of these 3 giants. Oh, liar, they all shouted at him. And Wasameg said, really, Sherdon, you do need to have some truth if you're telling a story. That's completely... We can't believe a word you're saying. Liar. Sherdon stopped in his tracks. You'll regret that, he said. You'll regret stopping me. You've lost not only a good hunting story, worse than that, you've lost something magical that I was going to give you. but I'm not giving it now. You need to go. And the mood was broken. And the Narts left in disarray, which isn't the usual way for a Nart feast to end at all. Well, a couple of days later, they were going out on a winter hunt, and Camus said to the others, he said, you know what? We should invite Sherdon. You don't want to get on the wrong side of Sherdon. You never know what'll happen. And he does fine game. Let's have some fun with him. Go and invite him. So they dispatched a young Nart messenger off to Sherdon's official residence. Sherdon was delighted to see the messenger. And he said, come in. No, said the messenger, can't stop. The Narts have asked that you come immediately and come hunting with them. Come hunting straight away. And Sherdon said, but I haven't got a horse, as you know, I haven't got a horse. That's all right, said the messenger, don't worry about that. We've got plenty of horses, he said, and get everything ready. And Sherdon started getting everything ready. And the messenger said, you needn't worry, he said, if you're going on foot, you can be sure that we'll be riding. And if we're riding, you'll be sure that you're going on foot. So everything's going to be fine. But Sherdon wasn't really listening. And pretty soon out he went, and he followed that Nart messenger to where 3 magnificent horses were prancing, clipping their hooves against the hard ground, and plumes of steam coming out of their nostrils. Ready, said Wasameg. You'll be on foot. Yes, I'll be on foot to begin with, said Sherdon, I know. And off they set. Well, the young Narts who were accompanying them, they thought it would be very funny to go through a spiky field of stubble. And so they went through this field, and Sherdon on foot with his poor quality thin sandals. Very soon his feet were cut, and he had cuts up his calves as well. But he kept on, knowing that he was going to ride soon. And then they came after a while to a great river, a great torrent, freezing water. And they were to cross over. And the horses began to cross over. And Sherdon said, wait a minute, I can't cross. I've got no horse. I can't cross the river. So Wasameg said, oh, don't worry. He said, take hold of the tail of my own horse. He said, take hold of the tail and we'll drag you across that way. Don't worry, Sherdon. So Sherdon took hold of the tail of Wasameg's horse and started across that freezing river. And when they were halfway across, Wasameg stopped his horse and he turned over his shoulder and he said, Sherdon, I've been meaning to ask you, you're a clever chap. He said, how often should a man cut his toe and fingernails? And Sherdon, who was looking at the far side of the river, hopefully said, well, whenever he thinks of it, just do it whenever you think of it. I'm thinking of it now, said Wasameg. And he pulled off his gloves and he pulled off his boots and he took out a knife, and in a leisurely fashion, he began to pare away at the nails on his fingers and on his toes. And Sherdon, his teeth chattering in that cold water, and finally, Wasameg finished, put everything away carefully and neatly, and went over to the other side. And Sherdon could hardly feel his fingers and toes or his body by this stage. He said, I think it's time for me to ride now. I don't think so. Yeah, one of you walk and I'll get up on the horse. Why would we do that? Why would we do that, said Camus. Well, you said Sherdon, you said that when we said, we said, said Camus, you go on foot, we'll ride. We ride and you go on foot. And they wiped tears from their eyes with laughter. Sherdon wasn't laughing. Sherdon waited for them to finish, and then he said, right, he said, I'm staying here. You go on without me. He said, I'm staying here, he said, and you go home without me. And your wives and your girlfriends will think that you have stolen me away and sold me into slavery, and you will lose your honor. Well, this wiped the smile off the faces of the Narts. He's right, you know, said Wasameg. All right, Sherdon, fair enough. Hop up behind each one of us in turn and we'll each give you a lift. Start with Camis. So Sherdon hopped up gratefully behind Camis, and pretty soon the warmth of the horse underneath him and the warmth of Camis in front of him and the lovely sheepskin saddle lining that he could feel were warming him up. And as they went along, something started knocking against Sherdon's knee. And he felt what it was. It was something in Camis's pocket, something slim and angular. It was his tinderbox. Sherdon took it out and pocketed it. Soon after that, Sherdon said, I think your horse has had enough. I'll go with Sosruko now. So he hopped up behind Sosruko, trotted along, felt for Sosruko's tinderbox. There it was, in Sosruko's pocket. Pretty soon it was nestled up against the other one in Sherdon's bag. Time for your horse to have a rest, I think, he said. So Wazameg's turn. Hopped up behind Wazameg, going along behind lovely big burly Wazameg, lovely and warm by now. Slipped his hand into Wazameg's pocket. Yes, sure enough, there was Wazameg's tinderbox. That was soon nestling against the others. Very pleased with himself, Sherdon slipped his hands into the sheepskin to warm them up, and wait a minute, there was something else. Another tinderbox. Crafty, thought Sherdon to himself, and he pocketed that one as well. Well, soon after that, it was time to break for the night. So the Nart stopped and very efficiently started setting up camp, gathering firewood and rushing off to shoot game for the evening meal. When it was all ready, light the fire, Camis, will you? Said Wazameg. And Wazameg put his hands in his pocket. Oh, funny, he said, I could have sworn I brought it with me, but I don't seem to have my tinderbox. All right, Sosruko, what about you? Sosruko felt in his pockets, felt in his bag, looked in his saddlebag. Well, I don't know what's happened to it, he said. Must have fallen out on the way. Call yourself Narts, said Wazameg. I'll do it. Couldn't find his tinderbox. Yeah. Well, he said, I always keep a spare. Go off, he said to the young Nart, and find my spare. It's underneath the saddle. It's not there, sir, called the messenger, the Nart. Look again. Still not there, sir. Well, Wazameg said to Sherdon, who was gathering little twigs together to make his own tiny fire and studiously not taking any notice. He said, well, we'll have to use yours, I'm afraid, Sherdon. Sherdon, I don't have a tinderbox. I'm travelling light. Where would I put a tinderbox? I don't have a horse, you see. I don't have a horse. Well, he said, none of us seems to have a tinderbox. So the only thing for it is maybe you guys go off and look for fire. Maybe there'll be lucky, there'll be a hunter nearby, or maybe a homestead, and you'll be able to borrow fire. Go and borrow fire. I'd come with you, but I'd only slow you down because I don't have a horse, you see. I don't have a horse. And there was nothing for it. So the three Narts, they saddled up again, tired and hungry, and off they went to look for fire. As soon as they'd gone, Sherdon took his pick of the tinderboxes and lit himself a lovely little fire to keep warm by. And then, because he could, he lit another fire to keep himself warm by. And soon he had 2 fires blazing, and shortly after that, his mouth was watering to the scent of roasting meat. Ah, and then Sherdon set to for this delicious feast. Well, those Narts did not get back until it was nearly dawn, and picture the sight that met them. The embers of 2 fires, and curled round one of the fires, the suspiciously rotund figure of Sherdon, with grease all over his moustaches, a smile on his face, and the remains of kebabs all round him. They didn't even speak. They took in the situation at a glance. Before he was even awake, they hauled him to his feet, and before he could open his eyes, they had bent down a tree, and they took him and they strung him to the top of his tree by his moustaches, and then they aborted the whole hunting mission and drove home. Took their horses, found their tinder boxes, and left him on that freezing morning, strung up on a tree. And as Sherdon came to properly, he heard in the distance, "Little bastard, he'll never be one of us. He'll die there and good riddance." He looked about him, and there below was mist rising from the chill, cold earth. Stark skeletons of trees around him. Nothing, just silence. He was on his own. Soon a watery winter sun came out, but it had no heat in it. And the mist began to disperse, but nobody came. And he said to himself, "You've done it now. You're for it," he said. "You're for the death. You're for the big death," he said. And then he thought, "I'm going to die. I shall have a noble death. Even though there's no one here to see me die, it will be noble." And he looked up towards the sky. Just as he did that, a jaunty whistling below him. And he looked below, and there was a shepherd coming by, driving some sleek, fat sheep in front of him. Immediately Sherdon looked up at the skies and said, "Oh, my lord, that I should see this," he said. "Oh, it's a miracle. Oh, that I should live to see such a thing." The shepherd stopped. The shepherd looked. "Oh, there you are, master. Oh, what are you looking at?" "Don't disturb me. I don't want to miss a moment of this. Go away, leave me alone." I would, my master, but what is it you're seeing?" "Don't ask me. You'll only want to come up here yourself, and I don't want to miss any of it. It's a miracle, I tell you." I promise I won't. What is it?" "Well, I'm looking at God himself, and he's shearing his sheep in a miraculous way," said Sherdon. "God shearing his sheep? Oh, master, please let me come up. I promise I won't stay long, but just let me come up." "I knew you'd say that. Go away." "No, promise. Let me. I promise I'll put you straight up there." So he agreed. And the shepherd bent down the tree and he released Sherdon. And Sherdon, quick as a flash, had that shepherd fastened up, and up, boing, the tree sprang again. And the shepherd was left looking up at the sky. "I can't see God," he said. "No," said Sherdon, "not yet. You need to wait till your heart's a bit purer." And he began to gather the flock of sheep together. And as he drove them away from the shepherd, he called back, "God works in mysterious ways." And off he went. And he drove those sheep all the way back to the Nart village. Picture the sight. The first thing the Narts saw was an enormous flock of sheep shining in the morning sunshine, and behind them the diminutive figure of Sherdon strutting behind. Well, they greeted him like a hero. They put him up at shoulder height, and they brought him in, and they arranged a feast for him. They said, "How did you do it, Sherdon? How did you bring this miraculous thing to us, these sheep? We can live all through the winter on this." And Sherdon, he said, "Yes, well, it was all down to my own cleverness," he said. It was very clever of." And then he looked and he saw Wazameg, Karmis and Sosruko as they glowered at him. And he said, "But I couldn't have done it without the help of my dear cousins, my blood brothers." Excuse me, I tear up when I think of it, but they did everything really. I played a small part, but Mainly it was them. Mainly it was them. Hooray! Said all the Narts. And they held a feast in Sherdon's honour. And after that, all doors were open to Sherdon, and he was accepted into most of the Nart houses. The three Nart warriors, they sat back and they looked at each other and they shook their heads. Karmis, with the silky moustaches, he said, He's got the treachery of the water and the cunning of the earth. Sosruko the fiery, he piped up. Waters, he said, you could drown him. You could hold him under in the waters and he'd come out dry. Yes, said Wasameg, but we need him, don't we? And that is the end of this bit of the trickster stories of Sherdon. But it's not the end of all the stories. It's about the middle. But that's about right for a trickster, isn't it? Because where else would you leave a trickster but in the middle?
Thank you. Thank you, Dawn. Oh, brilliant. There's Dawn's having to go on a magic carpet somewhere else next week, but she'll be back the week after and the week after that for the other two Nart stories, and I can't wait. I especially like that bit where they're in the middle of the river and the guy stops to do his toenails. I mean, that just oh, brilliant. Anyway, thank you, Dawn. I'm going to quickly go through the week and then we'll come back to you because before everyone goes, because it's really exciting this week. We've got we've got Morocco tomorrow night, and then Friday we've got Rob Cloney with the children's stories, and Sunday you're all invited to the worldwide story round. Come tell the story, and that's at 6 o'clock on UK time. I have to say that because I'm could be anywhere, and so 6 o'clock on Sunday, and come have a short story ready, and then and on Monday I've got a really special one with East Anglia. I spent most of my life in East Anglia, so I've got East Anglia, tales of abolition and Sierra Leone, and there's a storytelling historian friend of mine that's going on there, and then we're bringing an African storyteller to bring in the current Sierra Leone. So we've got this huge geographical spread, starting from East Anglia and then spreading across to Africa. That's enough for now. But Dawn, we are really happy that we could just unmute yourselves, have a word with Dawn, ask her questions, and we'll retire to a bar or something. And
If only.
A virtual bar.
Yeah, if anyone wants to, I see we've got lovely Nadia and Peregrine as well with us, so it's lovely to see you both as well, and Gemma and Tina and all the other wonderful people. So if there's anything you want to say or ask, please do.
I just want to say how it was just like last week, how you just seamlessly just like wove these stories together. I was like, oh, it was just really fantastic. And it had a different feel to last week as well, because obviously they're different stories, but the whole energy just rippling through it, you could all the way through. And I just absolutely love the way you just take on these characters as well. It's brilliant. So I don't really have any questions other to say. I just really loved it. So thank you.
Thank you, Gemma. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought that was terrific, Dawn. And I know you have a special place in your heart for trickster stories, which I very much share. So fantastic. I really enjoyed it. Well done.
Oh, thanks, Nadia.
So, how long do with that?
I can't quite pick that up. I'm wondering if is this a way you can put it in the chat, perhaps? Sorry, I didn't quite. Maybe somebody else. My ears are a bit dodgy. Pick that.
Can you repeat that, David, please?
How long does storyteller.
How long are the stories? Or how long have you been storytelling?
Oh, is that it, David? How long have I been storytelling?
How long do you practice? I think maybe.
No.
No.
Well, I've been telling the Nart story. I started to be obsessed with the Nart stories in about 7 years ago when I heard my first one. But it took me a little while to there's so many of them. It took me a while to get to grips with the immensity of them. And really, it's only been in the last 3 years that I've been telling full length sets of them. 3 or 4 years been telling full length sets. But I'm so glad you like them. I think there's.
That
Oh, he loves Nart Stories. Oh, do you know, David? Do you know Nart Stories anyway? Have you met them before?
not really. I am a storyteller.
I'm not sure I'm completely picking that up, but I do have bad audio here, so I'm really sorry, David. I'm not completely picking up what you're saying, and I'm wondering if it's possible to put something in the chat. Oh, you're a storyteller. Ah, David, you're a storyteller. Thank you. Oh, well, welcome. Welcome to the Raggle Taggle band.
What's that?
Fantastic.
Anybody else as well? Oh, Ceridwen. Oh, Ceridwen's at work. Naughty Ceridwen.
Some of us have to. It's
Yeah.
I've been trying to avoid it most of my life and blagging my way through life, but some people unfortunately have to do these things.
One of the best reasons to become a storyteller, isn't it? To escape real work.
Oh.
Anyway, if nobody else is, I don't want to keep you all. If we could all go to the bar, that would be so nice, wouldn't it?
Well, it'd be great. And if anyone's got 5 pence to spare, they can pop it in Dawn's hat. And
it'll be just donated. I'm just donating.
Yeah, you're sending everything to. It all goes down. All Dawn's the tips go down to the storytelling cafe, in Marrakesh Cafe Clock. And once a month they dole out, because there's no furlough, there's no social security in Marrakesh, so they dole out the tips there to the Marrakesh storytellers, who will be with us. One of them will be with us tomorrow night. But there's so thank you for that, Dawn.
How do you donate?
Sorry.
How does one donate?
Oh, you go to the go back to the site, where you clicked on to get there, and there'll be a little hat beneath Dawn's thing, and that will just take you to the PayPal.
All right. You have to.
We've got that link to Marrakesh tonight, haven't we, Yulia? Perfect. Nadia's saying let in next when you're next performing, and you're doing your next Nart story
in 2 weeks.
Not next week, but Wednesday after.
Yeah, the Wednesday after next. I think it's the 25th. Would it be
25th? I haven't got the diary with me.
No, it's the Wednesday after next.
Wednesday after next.
And then
we can see you now, David. Fantastic. Your light's better now. So hello, David. We can see. We can actually see you.
Yeah.
So thank you, everyone, and thank you for coming. Please visit us on Sunday and any time. You're all welcome. You're all welcome in the tent at any time. Most days we're at 6 o'clock, except for Tuesdays, which we do an hour earlier, which is 5 o'clock, because we have young tellers on Tuesdays. So we have teenage tellers, and where they've been coming from all over the world, Gaza, Romania, everywhere. So But now, good night